I remember the exact moment my world shifted. It was a Wednesday, the kind of gray, damp morning that already presses down on your shoulders before you even get out of bed. I was standing in my dad's study, staring at the empty armchair he used to sit in every night with a crossword in one hand and a cup of peppermint tea in the other. The chair was still warm from when the hospice nurse had come in to straighten things up after he passed. He was gone, just like that. I thought losing him would be the hardest part of this story. I had no idea that grief was only the opening act. My name's Lucas. I'm 27 now, but this all started a few months after my 26th birthday. My dad, Jonathan, passed away after a long, brutal battle with pancreatic cancer. He was my best friend in the world. We didn't always see eye to eye when I was younger. He worked a lot, always at the firm or traveling for court, but after I hit college, we really found each other. Weekly calls turned into daily texts, and eventually, dinners every Sunday without fail. My mom passed when I was 11, so it had always just been the two of us for a while. Until Donna. She was something else. Blonde, sharp-featured, always dressed like she was on her way to a garden party in the Hamptons, even if she was just going to the post office. I first met her when I came home from my junior year of college, and I'll never forget the way she looked me up and down like I was a stray dog on her lawn. "So you're the infamous Lucas," she said, flashing one of those smiles that somehow made her eyes colder, not warmer. "Your father talks about you constantly." I was beginning to think he was exaggerating. That was her idea of a compliment. They married a year later. Quick, quiet, no real ceremony. I wasn't invited, which apparently was a mistake due to some lost email. Dad swore up and down that Donna thought I couldn't make it. I let it go because, well, he was happy. And after years of being alone, he finally smiled again. And that mattered more than whatever weird tension Donna insisted on radiating like it was her personal cologne. Still, something always felt off. She never really got involved in our Sunday dinners, and when she did, she'd chime in with passive-aggressive jabs. Like the time I brought over an old photo album and she scoffed. "Ah, the shrine. He's always so sentimental about the past." Or when she learned I was working on a nonprofit project and said, "You're still doing that little passion thing. Must be nice not to have real bills." Dad always gave her a look, soft, warning, maybe even a little embarrassed, but never said much. And I never pushed. Because again, he was happy. Or so I thought. Things changed when the diagnosis came. Suddenly, I was around more. Appointments, meal planning, coordinating visits with doctors. I worked remotely for weeks at a time to stay with him. Donna was always busy. Book clubs, brunches, spa days. She was there, technically, but emotionally, checked out. She'd flit through the house like a guest in a hotel, always sighing as if the air itself bored her. One afternoon, I was helping Dad get into bed after a particularly harsh chemo session. He grabbed my wrist, held it tight. "Lucas," he said, his voice thinner than I'd ever heard it. "There's a folder in the safe. Behind the records. It's for you. Don't let her talk you out of reading it." He didn't say what was in it, and he didn't have to. That was Dad for you. Never direct, always a puzzle to solve. A week later, he was gone. The house went quiet in the kind of way that eats at your ribs. Donna didn't shed a tear. Not one. She wore black, sure. Played the part. Even gave a short speech at the memorial. "He was a great man," she said, voice trembling just enough to seem believable. "And he loved this family, his new family." I was sitting in the second row, gripping the chair so hard my knuckles turned white. Because I knew, those words weren't for me. They were for the crowd. For the show. Donna always knew her audience. After the service, people lingered around the house, offering casseroles and awkward hugs. Donna floated through them like a queen in mourning, nodding graciously. I was in the kitchen when she finally cornered me. "We should talk," she said, sipping a mimosa like it was just another Sunday. "About the estate. I know you probably assumed there'd be something left for you, but, well, John and I made some decisions before he passed." She smiled. Not kindly. "Everything is coming to me. The house, the savings, the business stake. It's all in my name now." I blinked. "What?" She placed a manicured hand on my arm like she was consoling a toddler. It was nothing personal. But Jonathan and I agreed that he needed someone who could really manage things. "You're idealistic, Lucas. Sweet, but not exactly the practical type." Then she tilted her head, voice dropping to a whisper. "Besides, he told me something, just between us. He said you were always a bit of a regret, that he wished he'd done things differently, that maybe having you young held him back. I couldn't breathe. I actually felt the air punch out of my lungs. She walked away after that, just turned and walked off like she hadn't just pulled the ground out from under me. I stood there in the kitchen, surrounded by half-eaten deviled eggs and murmured condolences, heart pounding like I was back in middle school getting shoved into lockers. The worst part? A tiny, poisonous part of me believed her. Because grief makes you stupid, vulnerable. I started wondering, had Dad really felt that way? Was I just a burden to him, even in the end? But then I remembered the folder. The safe. That night, after everyone had cleared out and Donna went upstairs, I stayed behind. I waited until the house was silent. Then I crept into his office, opened the old safe behind the bookshelf, and pulled out the folder labeled with my name. Inside were a few things. A handwritten letter, a copy of the will, some documents, and a photo of me and Dad fishing when I was 9, both of us grinning like idiots. In the letter, Dad wrote about how proud he was of me, how much he admired the work I was doing, how he wished he'd said it more. My hands shook as I turned to the copy of the will, and that's when I noticed something strange. The signature at the bottom didn't match the one I'd seen earlier. The copy Donna had shown me after the funeral. Hers had a slightly different date. A Messier signature. Not Dad's usual sharp penmanship. It was subtle, almost like he'd signed it while sick. But this one was clean, clear, dated months before his condition worsened. And that's when my gut twisted. Donna's copy wasn't just different. It was forged. I should have stopped there. I should have gone to the lawyer right away. But something in me snapped awake. This wasn't just about the will anymore. It was about everything. The way she'd frozen me out. The way she tried to erase me from my own father's legacy. The way she stood in the kitchen and told me I was nothing but his regret. So I made a decision. I was going to play the long game. Let her get comfortable. Let her think she'd won. Because Donna had no idea that I wasn't the only one who had seen that will. And she definitely didn't know I had already started recording. The day after I found the real will, I drove home with my head spinning. I didn't tell anyone. Not yet. Not even my girlfriend, Mia, who had been gently nudging me to talk to someone about how cold Donna had been after the funeral. Something about it all made me want to hold it close to my chest, just for a while. I didn't know who to trust yet. The original will left everything to me. Not just the house, but the business shares, his vintage car collection, even his annotated book collection. He didn't even mention Donna by name. Just a vague, my spouse, should she survive me, shall retain her own property. It was clear, unambiguous. My dad hadn't changed a thing since before he got sick. That meant only one possibility. Donna had created her version out of thin air. And the moment I realized that, something shifted in me. Anger, yes, but deeper than that. A kind of cold, focused clarity I hadn't felt since the day he was diagnosed. The next few weeks passed in a haze of forced politeness and quiet planning. I pretended to accept everything Donna said at face value. I kept showing up to the house, offering help with arrangements, bills, paperwork, anything she'd let me get my hands on. She seemed amused by my sudden obedience. Mistook it for weakness. Finally growing up, she said one afternoon, swirling wine at 2 p.m. like it was water. Your father always said you were soft. But maybe this loss made a man out of you. I smiled, said nothing. But inside, I was already lining up my next move. The lawyer, Mr. Grayson, was someone Dad had worked with for years. I called him under the pretense of wanting to thank him for handling the estate so professionally. We met at a quiet cafe in town, and I brought the folder with the original documents. His reaction was immediate. His hand froze halfway to his coffee, eyes scanning the signature on the second page like it had slapped him across the face. Lucas, he said slowly, this is the copy I drafted for your father nearly a year ago. The one he signed in my office. But the version Donna brought me had edits. I leaned forward. Edits? He nodded, rubbing his jaw. Language changes. More vague allocations. And the signature? Well, I thought maybe your dad was shaky that day. He wasn't doing well. He looked me dead in the eye. But this is clear, definitive, and notarized. He pointed to a seal in the bottom corner that Donna's version conveniently lacked. This is the valid will, Lucas, not the one she submitted. My hands clenched in my lap. Can we do something? Oh, he said, a faint smile playing on his lips. We're going to do a lot. But I wasn't ready to confront her yet, not without knowing how far she'd gone. And the more time I spent around her, The more I realized this went deeper than a fake will. Donna was slowly dismantling everything my father built, everything he'd hoped I'd protect. She started selling his belongings. The first time I walked into the house and saw the framed photo of him and me on the boat missing from the mantel, I thought I was imagining things. Then the fishing rods vanished from the garage. Then his books, one by one, gone. Estate cleansing, she called it. I can't bear to look at this stuff anymore. It's just clutter. One evening, I caught her on the phone with someone talking about liquidating assets. She didn't notice me in the doorway. Yes, she said, flipping through a leather-bound planner. He had a few collectibles. We're still assessing what's worth keeping. The house will go soon. Lucas? Oh, he's just visiting. I'm letting him get his closure. That night, I drove home shaking. She was planning to sell the house. My childhood home. The place where my mom used to read to me at bedtime. The garden my dad planted from scratch after she died. Donna saw it all as real estate. Numbers in a spreadsheet. It made me sick. I told Mia everything. The will. The forged signature. The lawyer's reaction. She listened without saying a word, her fingers tightening around her coffee mug. When I was done, she looked at me and said, "You're not just going to stop her, Lucas. You're going to make her regret ever trying this." It was the boost I didn't know I needed. Over the next few weeks, I started collecting proof. Screenshots, photos, receipts. I installed a small voice recorder in the study, the same one Dad used to use for his client notes. It was tucked behind some old books on the shelf. Donna never noticed. I caught hours of her making calls, boasting to her friends about how she outmaneuvered me, how Lucas doesn't have the stomach for a fight. She even made a snide joke once about how Dad always did have terrible taste in family. But the final straw came one Sunday afternoon. I stopped by the house earlier than usual. She wasn't expecting me. Her car was out front, but the house was silent. I walked in and called her name. No answer. I headed toward the study and froze. She was in there, sitting behind Dad's desk, papers spread out before her, and she was scribbling. Hard. Her hand jerking back and forth like she was angry at the paper itself. I stepped closer. It was another copy of the will. Another one. I stepped into the doorway. Having fun. She jumped, snapping the folder shut so fast it nearly tore. "Lucas," she said, standing quickly. This is just old documents. I was organizing. I saw the real one, I said quietly. Her smile faltered. "What do you mean?" "The one with the notary seal. The one dated 6 months before the one you submitted. The one you pretended never existed." Her face didn't change, not exactly. But something hardened in her eyes. A crack in the mask. She took a breath, smoothed her blouse. "Lucas, your father was very sick. He changed his mind. He wanted me to have everything. You were, well, you've always had a soft heart. He said you wouldn't understand the kind of pressure he was under. You weren't ready to take on the responsibility. You're not a businessman, Lucas. You work with what? Kids and grants. I didn't move. You forged his will. You can't prove that," she said calmly. I didn't respond. Just let the silence stretch long enough that she shifted uncomfortably. Then she smiled again. "Even if you could, what's your plan? Drag your stepmother to court? Publicly accuse the grieving widow? That won't look good, sweetheart." I laughed. Actually laughed. "You know what won't look good? The audio files I've got. The ones where you admitted to altering documents. Where you laughed about liquidating the estate. Where you called my dad a fool for leaving me anything." She went pale. "You recorded me?" she hissed. "I didn't need to," I said, stepping closer. "Because you never learned to shut up." And for the first time, Donna didn't have a comeback. But she wasn't done. 2 days later, I got a call from Mr. Grayson. "She's contesting the will," he said. "Her lawyer just filed a claim that your father was mentally unfit when he signed the original version. That he was coerced. By you." I laughed again, but this time it was hollow. "She's saying I manipulated my dying father? She's playing dirty, Lucas. And this is going to get uglier before it gets better." I hung up the phone and sat in my car for a long time, staring out at nothing. It wasn't just about property now. It wasn't about money or keepsakes or revenge. This was war. And Donna had no idea that she had just made the worst mistake of her life. Because I wasn't the only one watching her anymore. There were others. And they were finally ready to talk. The weeks that followed were some of the darkest I've ever lived through. I wish I could say I stayed strong and unshaken, but that would be a lie. Donna's legal claim hit harder than I expected. Not just because it was bold and dishonest, but because it forced me to question everything all over again. I kept replaying Dad's final weeks in my head, wondering if I'd said or done anything that could be twisted. Had I pushed too hard when I asked him about finances? Had I looked too eager when he handed me the keys to the study? Could any of that be taken out of context? Donna's claim was that Dad had been manipulated in a weakened mental state, influenced by an emotionally volatile son with a history of resentment. She even submitted a few emails between Dad and me, out of context, of course, where I'd vented about how distant he'd been after marrying her. Emails I thought were private, personal, but now they were evidence. Mr. Grayson was supportive, but even he looked concerned when I sat in his office and read through the filing. This is going to be a character battle, he warned. She's not trying to win legally. She's trying to make you look unstable enough that you'd rather walk away than drag this through court. And for a while, I almost did. Friends pulled back, not because they didn't believe me, but because they didn't know how to help. Mia was still there, always, but even she started to worry when I barely left the apartment for days. I was spiraling, not just from grief anymore, but from the weight of the accusations. I lost my job. Technically, it was a temporary leave that my manager framed as understanding. But I knew what it really was. The nonprofit couldn't afford bad press, and having an employee tied up in a legal mess over a disputed inheritance was too much. They told me to take time and come back when things were settled. I knew that meant I wouldn't be coming back at all. Then came the smear campaign. Donna had money, not just from my dad, but apparently from a separate trust her own father left her years ago. And she used it, carefully, subtly. A blog post popped up online claiming I was a bitter son attempting to erase a grieving widow from her rightful inheritance. It didn't use names, but it mentioned details only someone close could know. My work history, my nonprofit involvement, my father's illness. A second post followed, then a third. Then a few social media accounts started echoing the same narrative, tagging people I knew, linking to the blog. The posts were generic enough to avoid legal action, but pointed enough that they left damage in their wake. Someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, and I had no doubt who it was. I felt like I was drowning in quicksand. Every move I made only pulled me deeper. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and just stare at the ceiling, heart pounding, trying to figure out how someone could twist something so personal, so deeply painful, into a PR game. But then something changed. It was a message from someone I hadn't seen in years. "Hey, I'm sorry to hear about your dad. I have something you might want to see." It was from Jenny, my dad's old assistant from the law firm. She'd retired right before his health started declining, but we'd always gotten along. She used to sneak me gummy bears during late-night study sessions when I crashed at his office in high school. We met for coffee the next morning. She looked older, a little more tired around the eyes, but sharp as ever. "I kept a few things," she said, sliding a flash drive across the table. "Backups. Emails, schedules. I wasn't supposed to, but I always had this weird feeling about Donna." I took the drive home and opened it on my laptop like I was defusing a bomb. What I found made my chest tighten. Emails between Dad and Mr. Grayson discussing the will, confirming that he wanted me to be sole beneficiary, that he felt Donna had no emotional investment in his legacy, that he didn't trust her to preserve the home. In one message, he even wrote, "Donna's never been cruel, but she's cold. Lucas sees people. She sees property." There was also an attachment, an audio file, a voicemail Dad left for Jenny the week after he signed a real will. "If anything happens to me, and there's any question about what I wanted, tell Lucas to check the green folder in the safe. It has everything. I don't trust Donna with this. She's already asked too many questions about what happens when I'm gone." I sat there staring at the screen for almost an hour. It wasn't just proof. It was my dad's voice, affirming everything I'd feared and everything I hadn't dared hope. For the first time in months, I felt something anchor me, like I'd been drifting in fog and suddenly hit solid ground. I backed everything up to 3 different drives, made copies, uploaded them to encrypted cloud storage. I wasn't losing this, and I didn't stop there. I started reaching out, quietly, strategically, to people Donna didn't think I knew. Her first husband, her former financial advisor, a few of her old friends from the country club days. Turns out, Donna had a pattern. Charm, marry, inherit, move on. She never broke the law, at least not on paper, but she left a string of deeply uncomfortable stories behind her. One woman, Claire, called me after I left her a message. "You're Donna's stepson?" she asked. Her voice was dry, skeptical. Yes, Lucas. She's a vulture, Claire said immediately. She nearly ruined my cousin's life. Took him for everything. Gaslit him into thinking it was his idea. You're not the first, kid, but you might be the first to fight back. It felt like breathing clean air for the first time in weeks. From that point on, something lit up in me. A kind of quiet fury, but not the kind that burns out fast. The kind that sharpens. I started working out again. Small things. Push-ups. Jogging. Nothing fancy. But every drop of sweat felt like reclaiming something. I cleaned my apartment. Got a haircut. Updated my resume. Took freelance work where I could find it. Mia noticed the difference immediately. You're coming back to life? She whispered one night, curling into me on the couch. I missed this version of you. I smiled. I think I missed him too. Grayson filed a counterclaim. We submitted the real will. Attached the notarized version. The backup files. The audio message. Donna's team tried to suppress the voicemail, of course. Claimed it was emotional manipulation. But it was clear. Clearer than anything she had. I started getting more calls. People who knew my dad. People who hadn't believed Donna's version of the story. One of Dad's old partners offered me a consulting gig. Said he always admired how I handled myself during the illness. Another reached out to offer a character statement, should I need one. Jonathan talked about you constantly, he said. He loved that you led with empathy. He said he hoped you never lost that. It was the first time I cried in months. And through it all, Donna stayed silent. At least in public. Behind the scenes, she was scrambling. Filing delays. Changing lawyers. Reaching out to people I hadn't spoken to in years. Trying to dig up dirt. But she was late. I'd already done the work. Already fortified myself. And then came the letter. It arrived in a cream envelope with no return address. Tucked inside was a single sheet of paper. Typed. You think you've won. But you don't know who you're dealing with. Walk away, or I'll bury you. There was no signature. But the perfume clinging to the page was unmistakable. I showed it to Grayson. He nodded grimly. It's intimidation. Let's add it to the file. But I didn't need the law to tell me what that letter meant. It meant I was winning. Because Donna was scared. She had money, sure. Influence. But she'd built her life on smoke and mirrors. And now someone had turned the lights on. I wasn't the same Lucas she met in college. The one who awkwardly shook her hand and tried too hard to make her like him. That version of me died the day my dad did. This version, he knew who he was. I wasn't just defending an inheritance. I was defending my father's legacy. And Donna had no idea how far I was willing to go to protect it. Not yet. But she would. Because I had one final move left. And I wasn't playing alone anymore. The letter changed everything. Not because I was afraid of it. That part of me, the anxious, second-guessing version of myself who would have read that note and hesitated, was long gone. But because it told me Donna was finally losing control. She was starting to realize she couldn't lie, scheme, or manipulate her way out of this one. Not like before. You don't threaten someone unless you feel threatened. And that meant I finally had leverage. I didn't respond to the letter. Didn't mention it publicly, or even acknowledge it in court filings. I wanted her to think I hadn't taken it seriously. That I dismissed it. But privately, I used it as the final piece I needed to finish assembling the trap I'd been building for months. First, I met with Mr. Grayson again. This time not just as my dad's former attorney, but as my strategist. I want to go public, I told him, sliding a folder across his desk. Inside were copies of every major document we'd collected. The notarized will, the audio recording from my dad, Jenny's emails, the typed threats, and transcripts from hours of recordings taken from Donna's own mouth. Grayson leaned back, flipping through the pages slowly. You're ready for the press? I'm not going to the tabloids, I said. I want something more precise. Something cleaner. A targeted release. Not to ruin her, but to force her hand. She spent months trying to play this in the shadows. I'm done playing in the dark. Grayson nodded, impressed. We can release portions of this through a trusted journalist. Someone who'll stick to the facts and keep the story clean. Once this hits the right circles, she won't be able to hide behind her narrative anymore. The next step was building my network. I'd been quietly reaching out to people over the past few weeks, but now it was time to solidify those connections. I wasn't just some grieving son fighting a greedy stepmother anymore. I was the executor of my father's actual legacy, and people needed to see that. First, I visited Claire again, the woman whose cousin had once been Donna's victim. She'd been hesitant at first, unsure how far she wanted to involve herself. But after I showed her the letter, her expression darkened. She's still using the same playbook, Claire muttered, staring at the typed message. Threats, isolation, silence. She did the same thing to my cousin, only he didn't have the evidence. She's counting on silence again, I said. But this time, I'm giving her a microphone. Claire agreed to go on record. Nothing flashy, just a statement confirming her experience with Donna's tactics. She also connected me with another woman named Pamela, an old friend of Donna's from a country club in Virginia who hadn't spoken to her in years. I saw what she did to her last husband, Pamela told me over Zoom. She drained him, alienated his kids, then sold the house before he was even cold. She doesn't grieve. She just moves on with more jewelry. Each story added a new layer to the pattern. Donna didn't make mistakes. She made blueprints and followed them to the letter. She charmed, she took, she erased, and she moved on. Not this time. Next came the finances. Thanks to a contact I made through Dad's former law firm, a junior accountant who'd once handled some of his personal investments, I learned that Donna had already begun transferring assets into shell companies. LLCs registered in her maiden name, many of them created just weeks after my father's health took a turn. She wasn't just trying to claim the estate. She was trying to disappear it. Grayson and I compiled the information and flagged it with the probate court. That gave us legal grounds to freeze certain transactions and request a forensic audit on the disputed portions of the estate. Donna's response came swiftly, an emergency motion to block the audit, claiming it was harassment. It was denied. She was furious. I got the first direct message from her in weeks the following day. Short, cold. You're making this worse for both of us. Drop it while you still can. I didn't answer, because behind the scenes, something much bigger was unfolding. There was one piece of the puzzle I hadn't revealed to anyone yet. Not even Mia. It was something I discovered almost by accident. During one of my long nights digging through Dad's old files, I'd come across an encrypted folder on an external drive, something labeled simply as "Do Not Delete." It had been copied over from his work laptop years ago. At first, I assumed it was related to his cases. But when I finally broke the encryption using a password based on one of his favorite chess openings, something only I would have guessed, I realized what I'd found. Recordings, videos, phone logs, emails, all documenting Donna's financial behavior. Apparently, after a particularly tense argument about money, Dad had started keeping a digital trail of every significant interaction they had. Nothing overtly illegal, at least not at first, but it was clear he'd grown suspicious. In one recording, Donna openly discussed moving money into a separate account, just in case things go sideways. In another, she casually joked to a friend about how easy it was to make men sign things when they were distracted by fear. There was one video in particular, taken with a discreet camera in his study, that shook me to my core. It was Dad, thin, frail, but alert, sitting at his desk while Donna paced nearby. "I want to update the will," he said, his voice calm but firm. "And I want Lucas to be the sole beneficiary." Donna froze. "Jonathan, that's ridiculous. You're not thinking clearly." "I've never been clearer," he replied. "You've made your priorities obvious. I won't be manipulated into leaving my son out of what I built." "You'll regret this," she snapped. "When you're gone, and that ungrateful brat sells everything." "I trust Lucas," he said. "I don't trust you." It was dated 2 days before the notarized will was signed. I transferred the footage to a separate drive and locked it in a bank vault. It was my checkmate, not just for court, but for public perception. If Donna tried to escalate, if she tried to turn this into a smear campaign or push for a settlement that stripped me of everything, this was my nuclear option. But I didn't want to use it yet, because something bigger was coming, and I wanted her to walk right into it. The next step was setting the stage. I called Mia and told her everything. Every document, every clip, every plan. She listened without interrupting, her eyes wide but steady. "You're really doing this," she said softly. "You're not just surviving anymore. You're fighting." I nodded. He trusted me with this. I won't let her erase him. She reached out and took my hand. "Then let's finish what she started." Together, we launched a small website, simple, clean, fact-based. A digital memorial to my dad, framed as a tribute but laced with subtle truths. We posted scanned copies of the real will, the notarized signature, quotes from character witnesses, and statements from people Donna had wronged in the past. We never mentioned her name outright, but anyone with a Google search could connect the dots. The site went viral in our circle within days. Law firms, journalists, former clients of Dad's, old friends. Suddenly, the story wasn't entitled Son Disputes Inheritance. It was Suspicious Widow Challenges Long-Standing Will, Family Seeks Truth. Emails poured in. Support, encouragement, tips, and one message that stopped me cold. I worked with Donna years ago. I have a copy of a will she tried to submit after her last husband died. It also had a forged signature. I've been too afraid to say anything until now. But if you need me, I'll testify. I forwarded the message to Grayson immediately. It was the final piece we needed. We now had precedent, pattern, and motive. All that was left was the trigger. Because the court date was finally approaching, Donna had gone quiet in the days leading up to it. No more messages. No more public claims. I knew that meant she was preparing something. A final card to play. But what she didn't know was that I was already holding the ace. She thought she'd buried me months ago, but I'd been building this grave for her the whole time. And now, it was almost time to lower her in. But not yet, because there was one final twist left in the story, and even I didn't see it coming. The courtroom was smaller than I expected. It wasn't like the movies. No thunderous echoes, no dramatic gasps, no spotlights. Just muted wood panels, a tired ceiling fan clicking overhead, and rows of creaky benches half filled with strangers, some reporters, some friends of my father's, and a couple of people I didn't recognize but suspected had ties to Donna's past. Mia was there too, sitting quietly behind me, her hand resting gently on my shoulder like an anchor. Donna walked in flanked by two attorneys. She was dressed in black again, though this time, the look didn't say grieving widow. It said corporate defense. Her hair was swept up in a severe bun, makeup understated but deliberate. And for the first time since this all began, she didn't look at me. Good. Because if she had, she might have seen what was coming. Judge Halpern was presiding. A quiet, deliberate man with a reputation for patience and a brutal intolerance for lies. Grayson had said he was a by-the-book type, not easily rattled, not easily manipulated. That suited me just fine. The first few hours were procedural. Donna's attorneys presented her version of the will, citing unfortunate clerical discrepancies between signatures and claiming Dad's mental state had been unstable and easily influenced due to his illness. They referenced my emails again, tried to paint me as a manipulative, desperate son clinging to a false inheritance. I didn't flinch. I didn't even blink. Because we were only playing defense for now. Then it was our turn. Grayson stood, calm as ever, and began with the original will. The notarized copy, the time-stamped metadata, the email trail. He laid it out like a story, not just a case. My father's timeline, his intentions, his clear and conscious effort to leave everything to me, not out of favoritism or neglect, but out of trust. Then he played the voicemail, the one where Dad told Jenny to direct me to the green folder in the safe. A few people in the courtroom shifted uncomfortably when they heard his voice crack slightly near the end. It wasn't dramatic. It was real. But Donna? She didn't move. She didn't even blink. As if she thought staying still would somehow erase what everyone else was feeling. Grayson turned to the judge. Your Honor, this isn't just about who gets what. It's about who my client's father trusted with the life he built. That trust was recorded in documents, in his own words, and in the people who knew him best. Then he looked at me. Lucas, would you like to say something? I stood. My heart was pounding, but my voice came out steadier than I'd expected. I didn't come here to win a house or a bank account. I came here because someone tried to erase the last honest thing my father did. I came here because I refused to let his name be rewritten by someone who didn't even know how he took his tea. That earned a few quiet chuckles. Even Judge Halpern cracked the slightest smirk. I stepped down and returned to my seat. That's when we played our final card. Grayson introduced the witness, the woman who had emailed me weeks ago, Donna's ex-husband's cousin. She walked in with measured grace, and when she took the stand, her testimony was surgical. She described how Donna had forged a similar will in another state years prior, how she had impersonated legal representation during the filing, how she had left that marriage with a house, 3 accounts, and a very quiet out-of-court settlement after the family threatened to press charges. Donna's lawyers objected, claimed it was hearsay, but we had the documents. We had everything. And the moment that woman finished speaking, the courtroom shifted. The tone changed. You could feel it, like something just tipped. Donna's team started scrambling, whispering. They called for a recess. Judge Halpern granted it. But before he stood up, he turned to her attorneys and said, "You'll want to reconsider your position before we resume. This isn't headed where you think it is." They knew it was over. But I wasn't done. Back in the hallway, Donna tried to approach me for the first time since all of this began. I was standing by the water cooler, quietly talking with Mia, when I felt that familiar perfume creep up behind me. "Lucas," she said, "please. This doesn't have to end like this." I turned around slowly. She looked smaller than I remembered. Not physically, but less. Like all the scaffolding she'd built around herself. Money, lies, charm, had finally started to crumble. "It already did," I said. "The day you forged his name." She took a shaky breath. "He would have wanted peace between us." "No," I replied, my voice level. "He would have wanted you nowhere near his legacy." She blinked. That stung. I stepped forward, lowered my voice. "You made the mistake of thinking this was about money. It never was. It was about memory, about love, about who he trusted to carry him forward." Then I walked away. The final hearing resumed that afternoon. And it wasn't a hearing, it was a collapse. Donna's lawyers offered a quiet, desperate settlement. They proposed that I take the house and half the estate if I'd agree to stop the testimony and withdraw all media evidence from public view. They were trying to salvage what little reputation she had left. I looked at Grayson. He didn't even have to say it. We rejected it. 2 days later, Judge Halpern issued his ruling. The forged will was nullified. The notarized will was upheld. I was granted full rights to the estate, everything my father left behind, just as he intended. But the court didn't stop there. Due to the forged documentation and the attempted misdirection of funds, Donna was ordered to pay restitution for legal fees and was referred for criminal investigation related to fraudulent filings. Within a month, her accounts were frozen. Her reputation shattered. The blog posts vanished. The smear accounts went silent. I never heard from her again. Not directly, but I did receive one final message. Anonymous, of course. Just 2 words. "You win." I deleted it without responding. The fallout wasn't all clean and tidy. I still had to clean up the estate. Sort through years of files, photos, letters, memories. I found boxes in the attic labeled with my mom's handwriting, things I hadn't seen since I was a child. I found a letter my dad had written to her the year before she died. I found a birthday card I made him in 3rd grade, laminated and tucked inside his law degree folder. It was like meeting him all over again. Mia and I moved into the house a few months later. We didn't rush to change anything. We kept the garden. We left his books on the shelf. But slowly, piece by piece, we filled the place with new memories too. Sunday mornings became quiet rituals again. Not of grief, but of gratitude. The foundation my father built, that Donna tried so desperately to rewrite, wasn't made of paper or property. It was made of love. And that's something no one can forge, even if they try. Because in the end, the truth didn't just survive. It spoke. And this time, everyone listened. She tried to steal my father's legacy, but all she did was cement my place in it.